I've always hated long drives at night. The headlights, the isolation, the heavy darkness pressing in on either side of the car. It's eerie. But that night, I had no choice. I had a deadline. And the only way to make it was to drive through the night on an empty highway that stretched across miles of barren land. I wasn't familiar with the area, but the GPS assured me it was the fastest route, so I trusted it. The first hour passed uneventfully. The road seemed to go on and on, a straight line disappearing into the darkness. Every now and then, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, but they would fade as quickly as they appeared, swallowed by the night. I told myself it was normal. Other drivers out late, heading home, or to some distant destination, just like me. Then I saw the first set of lights ahead. Small, but steady. I let out a sigh of relief. Finally, another car. It felt comforting, like I wasn't alone in this vast, empty world. The car seemed to slow down, its taillights glowing like two distant stars. But as I got closer, something felt off. The lights flickered, almost like a mirage, then blinked out. I blinked, shaking my head, trying to clear the fatigue. Maybe they had just turned off a side road, but no road had appeared. The highway was a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the desert, unbroken. I kept driving. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The sense of time was slipping away. Another set of lights appeared in the distance. This time, I slowed down before I could get too close. They were there, two red lights, barely moving. My heart began to race as I approached. I told myself to relax. It was just another car, maybe an RV or a truck. But as I neared, the lights blinked again, fading until they were gone, swallowed by the road ahead. I pressed on the gas, unease prickling my skin. It was late, I was tired, and I knew my mind was playing tricks on me. That had to be it. Maybe I'd lost track of how far I'd driven, how late it really was. But the headlights continued to appear, one set after another. They would flicker into existence, a brief burst of red in the distance, and then disappear as soon as I got near. Each time it happened, the road stretched out longer and longer. I glanced at my GPS, but the screen was dark, the little signal icon spinning endlessly in the corner. I tapped it, hoping to get some bearings, but nothing happened. There was no way I could be lost. The highway was straightforward, no turns, no exits. But I had this growing feeling that I wasn't getting any closer to my destination. I tried turning on the radio, hoping some music or talk would distract me from the growing discomfort. Static. I flipped through the stations, more static. The occasional whisper of sound would break through the fuzz, but it was distorted and unintelligible, like voices from a faraway world. My fingers began to tremble, and I quickly turned the radio off, leaving only the sound of the engine humming and the tires rolling against the pavement. A light flashed in my rearview mirror, a bright white this time. I stared at it, feeling a sliver of relief. A car was catching up to me. I slowed down, moving slightly to the side to let them pass. The light got closer, close enough that I could feel its glare burning into my eyes. Then, it stopped. It didn't pass me. I looked again. The light was gone. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I knew I hadn't imagined it. I couldn't have. I accelerated, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The road seemed endless, an unbroken stretch of asphalt that cut through the night without destination, and the lights continued to appear. Sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. Sometimes they were red, sometimes white, but always disappearing before I could reach them. I thought of pulling over, just stopping for a few minutes to catch my breath. But the thought of sitting alone on that deserted highway, with nothing but the night around me, made my skin crawl. I had to keep moving. I had to get off that road. My phone's screen flickered suddenly, lighting up with a faint glow. For a brief second, I saw bars of signal. I grabbed it quickly, trying to find my location, but before I could even touch the screen, the light died again. In its brief illumination, though, I caught a glimpse of something that sent a chill down my spine. The gas gauge. It was almost empty. I hadn't paid attention to it earlier, assuming I had more than enough fuel to reach the next town. But now, with the gauge so low and no signs of civilization ahead or behind me, the weight of my situation fully set in. I hadn't seen a single exit or sign for miles. Panic began to take hold. I pushed the car faster, ignoring the unease building in the pit of my stomach. If I ran out of gas out here, on this godforsaken stretch of road, who knew how long I'd be stranded? The lights ahead appeared again, another set of tail lights, glowing softly in the distance. This time, I didn't slow down. I floored the gas pedal, desperate to catch up. The lights stayed steady, flickering slightly, but remaining in view. My heart raced. Maybe this time, I could finally reach them, finally see another human being on this cursed road. But just as I was about to close the distance, they vanished. Gone, like all the others. I screamed, slamming my hand against the steering wheel. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. My vision blurred as my mind tried to comprehend what was happening, but nothing made sense. And then I saw it. A gas station sign, faint in the distance. It was small, barely visible, but I could see the outline of a station. A neon sign glowing dimly through the night. Relief flooded through me. I just had to reach it. But as I drove closer, something shifted. The lights of the station flickered, distorted as if through a haze. The road beneath my tires began to feel wrong, rough, uneven. I glanced at the speedometer, and my heart stopped. The needle was spinning wildly, fluctuating between speeds that didn't make sense. The gas station faded, its lights swallowed by the darkness again. I was alone. The road stretched on forever. It always started at exactly 3 a.m. A light knock on the door, 3 quick taps, soft but deliberate. For weeks, I'd convinced myself it was some stupid prank. I mean, who knocks on doors at that hour for any other reason? But then again, I hadn't seen anyone. No shadows, no figures darting away in the hallway. Just the knock. Tonight, I wasn't going to let it slide. I was lying awake, waiting for it. The clock on my nightstand read 2:59 a.m. I sat up in bed, pulling the blanket tighter around me, though I wasn't cold. My mind was on edge, my senses sharper than usual. There was something about this night, something that felt different. 3 a.m. Tap. 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 I held my breath. I could feel my pulse in my throat, the pounding of my heart loud in the silence of the apartment. It wasn't just a knock. It felt more deliberate now, like whoever, or whatever was doing it, knew I was waiting. I slid out of bed, my feet making no sound as they hit the wooden floor. I didn't bother with the lights. I had long since memorized the layout of the place. The darkness wasn't a problem. I moved towards the front door, careful with each step. My mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe it was just some neighbor with a twisted sense of humor. But then why didn't I see them on the camera? I had checked it every time, rewinding the footage, looking for anything, any sign of movement. But the camera had always shown nothing. The hallway was empty. The knocks had been getting louder, though, closer. I hadn't told anyone about it. Who would believe me? It sounded absurd. There's a ghost knocking on my door at 3 a.m. every night. I could imagine the eye rolls, the dismissals, so I kept it to myself. Until tonight. I reached the door and placed my hand on the cold metal knob. The knocking had stopped by now. It always did. 3 taps, and then silence. It was part of the routine. A part of me almost believed that if I just waited, if I didn't touch the door, it would all go away. Maybe I'd wake up tomorrow, and this whole thing would be forgotten like a bad dream. But something made me twist the lock. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Some pull I couldn't explain. I opened the door, slowly, just a crack. My breath caught in my throat as I peered through the gap. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dimly lit by the overhead lights. Nothing seemed out of place. It was completely empty. I opened the door wider and stepped out. The hallway was deathly quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were the only person left in the world. I glanced both ways. No sign of movement. No shadows lurking in the corners. I closed the door behind me softly, feeling a little foolish now. Maybe it really was just some sort of prank, and I was overreacting. But I had to check one more time. I pulled up the security feed on my phone, scrolling back to 2:59 a.m. The hallway was perfectly still, as usual. No one approached the door, no shadow passed over the camera. Nothing. But then, just as I was about to close the feed, I noticed something. The time on the camera froze at 3 a.m., exactly when the knock had happened. I tapped the screen, trying to get it to move, but it stayed frozen, locked at that moment. A chill crawled up my spine. I switched off my phone and quickly went back inside, locking the door behind me. The silence in the apartment felt heavier now, as though the walls were holding their breath. I should have gone back to bed, but I couldn't. My eyes kept drifting towards the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that I wasn't alone. And then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't on the door this time. It was closer, much closer. My heart lurched in my chest as I realized the sound was coming from inside the apartment. It wasn't loud, but it echoed through the stillness of the room. I froze, my mind racing. Was I imagining it? No. There it was again. This time the knocking sounded like it was coming from the walls. I pressed my ear against the wall closest to me, trying to pinpoint the source. Tap. 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 I backed away, my breathing shallow. This wasn't right. This wasn't just some prank. Something was inside. The sound was moving now, traveling through the apartment, closer to me. I could feel it in my bones, the sensation of something creeping nearer, hidden just out of sight. I grabbed my phone again, pulling up the security feed. The hallway was still frozen at 3 a.m., but now the image was distorted, warped, like the camera had malfunctioned. The lights in the hallway seemed to flicker in the frozen frame. The knocking grew louder. I turned around slowly, my eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was there, watching me. I backed towards the front door, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the lock. But just as my fingers brushed against the cold metal, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing down on me like a weight. I stood there, waiting. Every muscle in my body tense. I didn't dare move, afraid that any sound I made would draw whatever was in the apartment closer. Then, suddenly, the doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately, as if someone was trying to get in. I froze, my back pressed against the door, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I watched in horror as the knob twisted all the way, the lock clicking open with a soft metallic sound. I threw myself forward, grabbing the knob with both hands, trying to keep the door closed, but the pressure on the other side was stronger than I expected. It wasn't violent, just steady, unyielding, like whoever, or whatever, was on the other side was in no rush. They knew I couldn't hold them off forever. I pushed with all my strength, my legs trembling from the effort. The door felt heavier than it should have, as though something far larger was on the other side, pressing against me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the pressure vanished. The door went still in my hands. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in ragged gasps, waiting for something. anything to happen. But nothing did. The apartment was quiet again, the oppressive silence settling over me like a blanket. I slowly unlocked the door, peeking out into the hallway. It was empty, just like before. I stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. Everything seemed normal again. No strange sounds, no signs of anyone or anything out of place. But I knew better now. Something had changed. I wasn't safe here anymore. I had to leave. As I turned to walk down the hallway, I glanced back one last time. My heart nearly stopped when I saw it. 3 small indentations on the door, right where the knocking had been. They were faint, almost invisible, but I knew they hadn't been there before. I backed away, fear clawing at my throat. I didn't know what had been knocking on my door at 3 a.m. every night, but I knew it wasn't just a prank. It was something far worse, something that wouldn't stop until it got in. I left the apartment that night and never went back.